Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be starting off a new project, one of the major projects on Hattrick, one of the many major projects I should say, and that is dealing with some of the woodwork and particularly the floorboards. So in front of me here I have a couple of the floorboards out of the boat, and it's fair to say they're in a sort of variety of conditions ranging from sort of not too bad like this one, to sort of pretty bad / previously repaired but still pretty bad. So one way or another we're going to have to do something about it. So today I'm at home in my kitchen / workshop, and I'm going to try and get this video recorded pretty quickly before Joe gets home and realizes I've added the / workshop bit to our kitchen, but hopefully this shouldn't be too messy. I will say, hopefully it's not too annoying, that our house is about 3 inches from a 60-mile-an-hour main road. So if you can hear cars going past, apologies. Hopefully it won't be too bad. I'll try and do what I can in the edit. But yeah, at least you only have to listen to a few minutes of this. You don't have to try and sleep with it. So when it comes to working with wood on boats, it can be a little bit tricky to get it right. Most things don't like a marine environment. And when it comes to wood, you've got to use sort of very particular types of wood. And I've, to be honest, not had great success with that. I've used, I always try and use the sort of highest grade marine plies and things like that. But you find that, they just don't last. As soon as the varnishing or painting or whatever protection you put on it kind of is penetrated, it just starts to taking water and swell. If you're using sort of like hardwoods and, real woods, they are prohibitively expensive these days. If you want a teak deck on your boat this day and age, you better be a billionaire, because, they are incredibly expensive and often quite hard to come by. So I started looking around at what options I could do to replace the floorboards on Hattrick, and I spoke to a sort of a friend of mine who is a joiner / wood crafts person, about the various options. The current stuff seems to be a sort of plywood with a sort of veneer on the top of it, and then obviously it's been sort of heavily varnished. It's obviously done a good job and it lasts pretty well, but this stuff's pretty old, and certainly after the recent sort of flooding incident on the boat, it's spent a lot of its life damp and in water, and it's really started to show its age. And I didn't really want to go and spend a lot of money on plywood only for it to just turn to crap in 6 months' time. So I started to look around at what other potential options there were for replacing the floorboards in the boat. So to that end, I actually came across this product, which is called EKOply, and essentially what it is a recycled plastic alternative to plywood. You've essentially got a load of shredded up old bottles or whatever that they used to make it, which is then sort of crushed and bonded together with this kind of smooth surface on the outside of it. And I've never really seen this being used in a marine environment. I have a number of different samples here, which I've sort of chopped up. These samples were provided to me by a company called Second Life Products Wales, who I'm not sure if they manufacture it or they're a distributor, but I had a sort of long chat with the guy there. He was really sort of helpful, and what he was saying was that this is very good in a water or wet environment, and he felt that it would be pretty good on a boat. He talked about the fact that it's been used in various sort of continuously submerged uses, so that's obviously a good sign. It has this kind of nice veneer or nice sort of finish on it. What I will say though is, and they're very open about this is not very scratch resistant. In fact, if I run my nail hard into it, I can actually mark it with just my nail. That's not too much of an issue. It would be a really big issue for floorboards, because obviously every time you get a little bit of stone or something like that underneath, it's going to make it look really rubbish. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is putting a vinyl floor down on top of it anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. Despite the reassurances of the company, and I'm sure they're absolutely telling the truth, it has this kind of quite porous edge to it, you can see. And obviously, my concern is that, is water going to get in there? Is it going to sort of debond it? Is it going to interfere with the glue or whatever's holding it together? And am I going to end up spending a lot of time and money making new floorboards out of this, only to find again, like my concern with the plywood, that it's going to end up expanding and turning to crap after a few months. Now, like I say, the company was pretty clear that wouldn't happen, and they were pretty confident in their product, and they sent me this sample. It's not a sponsored video. They've just been kind enough to send me a sample, which I think they'll do for anyone who's interested in the product. It came in one sheet. I've chopped it up using a chop saw, and it actually cuts really nicely. I actually can't tell the difference between my cuts and the sort of cuts that came from them. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty easy to work with in a similar way that wood is. My plan, in order to sort of tidy it up a little bit and maybe slightly reduce any water ingress into it, is to use a car bumper filler, which is basically like a very flexible plastic filler, and basically seal all the edges. That way I can sand it, maybe even paint it, and get a real nice smooth edge on it, which will also hopefully help to stop the water getting into it. But apparently, again, it shouldn't matter if water gets into it. Price-wise, this stuff isn't too bad. I would say it's sort of on par with sort of higher-end ply. I believe an 8x4 sheet is £70 or £80, which I guess is about $100. Which isn't too bad because, you know, particularly right now we're paying similar prices for plywood, if not more. And when I looked at other plastic alternatives like sort of high density polyethylene, an 8x4 sheet of this kind of thickness is about £1,000. So yeah, that's not really an option. In terms of strength, it's actually very strong. You know, I can't in any way kind of flex this. It does say on the website, I believe, not to sort of span more than 350 to sort of 400 millimeters with it, which I think is probably similar to what you'd expect from a ply of this thickness. You know, you certainly wouldn't want to make like a 8-foot bridge with no supports on this because it is going to snap just like plywood. But with the ETAP having the multiple ribs along the bilges, you know, it's never really spanning much of a large gap, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. And my intention, if this goes well, is to make, rather than having multiple boards like this, is to kind of make 2 boards for the floor in the main cabin at least. You know, I think these boards, you know, they're always going to be uneven, they're always going to be a bit wobbly, and there's always a chance of stuff falling down between them. And I think having 2 nice boards with a nice vinyl cover, potentially, if the budget's there, you know, the kind of fake teak kind of stuff, I think that will look really nice. I think it'll hold together really nice and it'll just make for a nicer floor. So that's the plan. However, before I go and spend a load of money, and more importantly a load of time, on making floorboards for this, I want to do some testing with it, and that's what we're going to do today. So my plan for testing these is essentially, I've got 2 baths here which I'm going to mix up some equivalent of seawater, because unfortunately I don't live anywhere near the sea, so I didn't want to drive several hours to go get seawater, but I do have sea salt and water, so I'm guessing that I can combine those two. And then we're going to submerge a couple of pieces of the EKOply and leave it for a week or so and see what it looks like at the end of it. So I've got 2 things here. I'm going to have one that's just a pure salt water bath, and then I'm going to make up what I'm calling the sort of bilge from hell, which is salt water. I've got some diesel, and I've got a mix of oil. I've got some 2-stroke oil and normal engine oil there, and hopefully that'll simulate the sort of worst case scenario, what they're likely to be subjected to on the boat. So right, let's mix it up. I don't really know what the exact concentrations are for salt, but I guess a lot would do. So we'll just shove a load in and mix it all up and see if we can't get it into something that might be close to seawater. Okay, I think that has nicely dissolved that salt, so I'm going to assume that this is going to float. Yeah, so I've got myself a couple of chunks of old paving slab to put on top. They're a bit dirty, but I guess as we're trying to add as much contamination to these as possible. So that's just the salt water one. Now we'll add in the diesel into this water and some of this oil, and obviously it's going to separate pretty hard, but you know, as I say, that's kind of how it would be on the boat. So let's see what happens. I'll just give it a good mix up. And yeah, that looks pretty horrific. Excuse me. And then we'll get the rest of that diesel out of there. And let's grab ourselves another piece. And I'm just going to actually wrap it around in the surface so it gets nice and covered in that oil and diesel that's floating on the surface, and then we will properly submerge it. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going to leave it now for. We'll leave it for a week, and I will check back with you, well, for you in a few seconds, and we'll see how it got on. So through the magic of editing, it's now about a week and a bit later, so these have been soaking out there, and they are complete with snow and ice because the weather has turned pretty cold in the last week. So yeah, I think it's about time we had a dig around in here and saw what's going on. A couple of things I changed since the first part I recorded is I actually added some paint thinners into this because I figure that's real nasty stuff for any kind of glue. And also I got a little offcut of marine ply a few days ago and submerged it in the bilge water from hell, because I thought I'd have a little bit of a comparison as to what it would look like to untreated marine ply, which isn't really a fair test, but I just wanted to see what it would look like. So right, let's get into it. So looking at the saltwater ones initially, I can see it doesn't really look like much has happened to it. So let's pull this one out and have a look. That is extremely cold. I mean, yeah, I can't necessarily tell. I've got one here which is a fresh one which hasn't been into anything, and yeah, I don't think that there's any sign of any water ingress. I don't even think it's actually, it doesn't even feel like there's any difference in weight, so I don't think the water's even really got beyond these sort of outer porous areas, and that is certainly, yeah, that has had no effect. I'm pretty sure it's only been about a week, the hat trick spent about a month underwater when she flooded, so I know a week isn't that kind of big a test, but I'm pretty impressed with how that has held up. Right, so now the real test. So let's have a look at. I'll tell you what I'm going to start with. Let's pull out the. I'm going to start with the wood and see what that looks like after a few days in there. To be fair, that's held up pretty well. Like I say, it's not a reasonable test because no one would use ply of any quality, without treating it or varnishing it or something. So, but yeah, I really kind of wanted to just compare how wood would survive for the same period, and to be fair, that's not doing too bad. There's a little bit of sponginess just around the edges of it, but yeah, it's actually not too bad. I think once we finish this test, I'm going to put them back in there and leave them in there, for the next few weeks, because it's going to be a little while before I can actually start working on the floor. But yeah, I know from previous experience that this is going to struggle long term. But right now, the moment of truth. How has our oily, horrible, diesely one survived? Interestingly, I'm noticing that it seems like it has less voids around the edge of it, which I don't know if that's just because I really don't want to touch anything now. This liquid is so horrific. When I put the wood in there a few days ago, it took me about 20 washing my hands to get the flavoured diesel off. It kind of looks a little bit like the voids have filled in. I don't know if that's expansion around the edge. Let me just have a look. Or whether or not it's just filled with the oil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse this off in the salty water and just see. I can really see that emulsification when I do this in the water, and just see. I think actually what I'm seeing here is just the emulsification from the oil is packed in, so the voids are still there. I was just slightly worried that it might have expanded out and filled those voids, which would sort of be the start of a problem. But there is a big void here, which, like I say, even the very thin edge to it has no softness to it. So, yeah, I'm going to actually call that a bit of a success, to be honest. It has shown literally no ill effects from the time it's been in here, which fills me with sort of a fair bit of confidence that, if it gets pretty wet or it lives a damp life as floorboards in the boat, that's going to stand up to it. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. Okay, so the second part I wanted to test out, as well as the soak test, is to see what we can do about tidying up these edges and sort of filling in this void. So to that end, I've got myself some of this Isopon. It's a brand that makes a lot of different car fillers. This one in particular is the plastic bumper filler, so it's meant to be really flexible, which I thought would be important, given that floorboards, no matter how securely supported they are, always going to have a little bit of flex in them. So what I'm going to do is prepare this and see whether or not we can get a layer on this one, see what that looks like. So I've applied the Isopon now, and I think that has come out really well, actually. If you compare it, the finished side to the non-finished side, you can see it's a world of difference. It has a really nice soft feel to it, and it feels like it's got a bit of flex in it, so I don't think it's going to end up cracking or breaking in it over time. So yeah, I think all in all that's a real success. I mean, I could do a slightly better job there, but that's my lack of ability more than the product, I think. Yeah, so I think this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to actually leave the episode there because it's going to be a little while now before I'm back up at the boat, but hopefully I'll do another episode in the next couple of weeks where we'll be looking at making up the design for the floor and hopefully ordering the material. And yeah, I think this is going to work really well and come out really nicely. So I want to thank you for stopping by. Hopefully it's a little bit of a weird one. Like I say, the channel's migrating from sort of sailing and the maintenance stuff, so obviously as we do a lot of the work on the boat over the next few months. So yeah, there's going to be some stuff which is going to be of interest to those who have an interest to it and not to those obviously who are looking for more of the sort of scenery and stuff that Joe does. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, make sure to subscribe and like, and as I say, in a few weeks time we'll see how this works in the actual boat.